Howdy, and welcome to Risky Standard, an actual play podcast featuring a rowdy group of best friends telling stories and playing tabletop role-playing games together. You can find the show over on Blue Sky at Risky Standard. And you can also find us on the show's Discord, and we'll include links to both of those down in the show notes. I'm your host and GM, Pete Loftus, assuming direct control of your broadcast system for this Risky Standard side story. And today we're going to jump right back into the action with part 4 of the Division of Silent Accords, where we're playing Scum and Villainy, a science fiction setting for Forged in the Dark games by John LaBeouf Little and Straz Asimovic from Off Guard Games. Today with me, I've got a returning cast of characters, including Dr. Alice Forstall, as played by Malcolm Hall.
Hi.
The Interstellar Soldier of Fortune, Argo Cattell, by Mitchell Brewster.
Greetings. This week was my first week of grad school for library studies, so I would actually prefer that I now be referred to as the archivist.
The archivist, Mitchell Brewster. Bibliophage and archivist, yeah. And, of course, we've got Brocco Kemmler by Timothy Manns.
What's up?
And last but not least, we have producer extraordinaire Liam Doherty in the wings. If you haven't checked out Fiasco, Liam did a really great job with a really complicated recording. So check that one out. That should be in the feed just before the first arc of this. And so, like I said, we're going to jump right back into the action today. Where we left off, our team of silent operatives had made their way deeper into the interior of the derelict space anomaly, designated the Aeonian by your ring intelligence handlers. You had encountered a strange interface control system, one which had been sealed off by virtue of a concordat warding ritual. The air within this antechamber thick with burning candles and plumes of incense. The control system itself a sort of boulder erratic on a dais, and above it floating a perfectly smooth stone sphere, sealed with kind of a wax and scroll imprint. Argo, being the tactician of the group, used the delinquent model drone to scout the ductwork above, looking for a safe passage of entry. But its feed quickly cut out due to some interference from a sort of fundamental radiation. And the last you saw of the drone, its feed indicated that it seemed to have at some point dropped and been down on its side in this ductwork. And the last thing you saw was this delinquent drone's feed being carried off by sort of skittering cesium gold legs, presumably of the same bacteriophage sentinels we saw crawling the exterior of the hull. You were then knocked off your feet by a pulse of unusual fundamental energy as this interface stirred to life after having broken the wax seal. From the sphere above, dripping in kind of thick gobs and slowly congealing, this boulder interface kind of split open and an entity appeared and introduced itself to you as an echo. Taking the form of a cesium gold skeletal figure draped in a heavy veil and cradling a human infant in its arms, whose head turned to you and bid you welcome, beckoning you further into the vessel. After a bit of back and forth, perhaps walking away with more questions than answers from this echo, a set of cool stone doors opened at the rear of the antechamber, leading deeper into the Aeonian. You were awed to find not just a maze of ductwork and cramped corridors, but a vast and cavernous interior within the Aeonian. Sort of like an O'Neill cylinder, the interior of the Aeonian was revealed to be a kind of hollow tube, its interior walls lined with structures and dotted with cityscape, perhaps once occupied but eerily still. And down its centrifuge, a long column connecting the interior faces of this kind of columnar shape with a long central pillar. And in the distance, you found the likely culprit of the gash on the exterior of the Aeonian's hull being a second Concordat ship, this one being much larger than the Chisel-class light assault shuttle we saw in the hangar. This would appear to be a kind of capital ship of the legionary fleet. And that's not all. As you approached the precipice of this balcony ledge that you now find yourself on, overlooking this kind of vast cavernous interior, you noticed a body slumped against a pedestal of a statue. And as we got close to potentially render some aid, you were startled as a hand shot up and grabbed you by your arm, Dr. Forstall. And where we left off, this kind of figure had just sort of lurched to life and exclaimed, "You're real." And that's where we're going to start today, kind of following this jump scare. To kind of set the scene again, this figure is clearly marked as what you would recognize as a Concordat figure of some rank. And so in this white ceramic breastplate, I think you can see inset would be an insignia you would recognize from the warding rituals that you had walked through on the way here. And I think where we open up the camera, Dr. Forstall, this Concordat figure is sort of like grabbing your tunic and I think pulling you closer.
I think I'm gonna quickly do some ring hand sign to Brocco to come assist me. Maybe point a muzzle in this man's face or put a hand over his mouth or something.
Bedside manner.
Mm-hmm.
The muzzle's pointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as you can kind of see the dust flake off of him. I think he's older, probably a little bit heavy set, maybe kind of bulging out of this armor a little bit, but his face I think is quite gaunt. And so tell me a little bit about what the plan is here. So you're kind of shaking a gun in his face.
I'm taking a gun in his face. I just want to say to him, like, I need you to please be silent, be quiet, shut up, sit down, pipe down, shut your mouth, and only communicate through nonverbal ways from now on, or until I say it's okay. Was that all right with you?
I think he's sort of like
He
looking
shakes his head no.
back at you, back at Brocco, kind of sighting this gun barrel pointing at him. And, I think he just puts a hand up to the barrel and kind of pushes it down and says, "What are you doing here? You need to leave."
Please, sir. Please be quiet. Are you hurt?
Is this a trick? You trying
No,
to get him to talk?
This is a serious question. Are you hurt? Answer my question now, please.
Hurt in ways I hardly understand myself. I suppose. You're welcome to try. I think death is around the corner for me.
Where does it hurt, sir?
And
I cannot help you unless you speak to me clearly right now.
I think he kind of taps the breastplate, right? And he says, "It's too late for me, but it's not too late for you. You must go now."
I'm going to try and pull his breastplate off. This weird old guy speaking in riddles. Maybe I can help him.
Sure. Does this kind of feel like you're using a move here? To me, this sort of sounds like the Physiker ability.
Yes.
Just like you can study a malady or a corpse and gather information from a crime scene or a corpse, and your crew.
I think that's what I was trying to do. At first, I thought I was studying a corpse. Now it seems like I'm studying a malady. Before we were cut off last time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens to me whenever I go to the doctor too. Is they usually tell me to stop talking, hold still, and point a gun at me until I can answer a few questions.
Yeah, you're hey. I feel like you're kind of maybe judging me right now. Okay, this is an enemy combatant. Okay,
sure.
I am helping him out because I am a doctor, and that is my. I'm sure that there's a sort of Hippocratic oath that is carried on through into space. And I'm not going to deny this man some medical attention, but also I don't know who he is. He could try and hurt us. So
totally fair. I don't want to underplay the threat here. Everything here is confusing. Yeah. So give me a study roll.
6.
Okay, that's a 6.
Mm-hmm.
So He's
fully healthy.
Are able to. I think popping this breastplate off, I think it sort of gives, if it were held on by leather straps, they tear like cloth. And I think in your initial study here, even just kind of getting down to get a better look, what is clear to you, I think, is that, despite his relatively recent uniform, it bears the mark of weathering and age in a way that doesn't really add up here. I think the ceramic is brittle, the straps and fastenings kind of fall away. And you can see his labored breathing kind of rising and falling. And I think on a 6, probably most obvious to you is that the color of his skin has a sort of odd pallor that I would say is kind of vaguely metallic. And
wait, does he look like that blue guy who would eat silver? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
a little bit.
Yeah, is he eating
or
what is that? Colloidal silver?
Yeah.
Yeah, not quite blue, but when there's just a tinge, there's an odd color. And I think he's sort of pale, and there's this kind of greenish pallor, I'll say. I think his veins are also bulging a bit. And I think you can probably make out, because you examined the bodies earlier in the hangar that were more desiccated.
He's swiftly being mummified.
I would say, probably on that way. I think you can see in the corners of his mouth is sort of a dried fleck of this kind of cesium gold color. It's beneath his fingernails, and I think that his veins kind of, I said they're bulging, but I would say they kind of quiver every now and then.
How did this happen to you?
How did this happen to you? Here? Coming here?
Answer my question. How did this happen to you? What did you touch? What did you come in contact with? Enough of these games.
I breathe the same air as you. And I think would gesture upwards with sort of a limp arm, and I think points towards that Concordat legionary ship and begin to explain, "My name is Pollux, a justiciar of the Reclamation. I was sent to bring the apostate paladin to justice. My crew and I, lost the cenotaph somewhere near the Monoceros beacon. This would have been maybe a year ago. I don't know how long I've been here. Time moves strangely. The only thing I know is that they have been here much longer. We were dispatched to recover the cenotaph. We believed the paladin had lost his way. The Hierophant commanded a return, but we thought perhaps they'd crashed. We thought something may have gone wrong. There was no signal. But as we quickly found, things here are not as they appear. He is too far gone, the apostate. I implore you, turn back. You seem to have overcome the warding cylinders, the messages, the warnings. Why have you come?
I think Brock is also getting tired of hearing this guy. They're already here. If that's going to happen, it's going to happen. We're already past that point. Brock is starting to kind of move past this area where this guy was and going to start peeking his head into some of the structures on the right of the statuary.
You're kind of antsy, looking around, kind of covering your exits.
The longer we sit and listen to this dude talk is just another opportunity for something else to creep up on us. So
I think, he sort of is faltering a bit, and I think even kind of stirring to life and speaking here. I'd say, Doctor, you've studied, you could attempt to stabilize and really try and doctor him well. But I would say even as he's talking, the veins bulging in his neck here quiver, right? It's clear something's not right with this man.
I'm gonna give him a I think I'm just gonna give him something for the pain and just let him pass. This looks like it probably hurts pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think he is you can even hear, I think, him strain now and then or grimace as he's trying to kind of fight through these words. I think, as you maybe sedate him, I don't know if you're slipping a needle in.
Okay, so never mind, actually. Yes, sorry. I think before Dr. Forstall can sedate...
I think I'm about to do it, and then you come over and you go, wait.
Yeah. When there's a question about who acts first, the answer is me. So I think as the good doctor's pulling out the sedative, injector or whatever from her med kit, I think it is Argo kind of sliding in and grabbing the justiciar by the undershirt, leaning in closely. Oh, I got a brief moment here to ask a question right before this guy is dead. That first question, right? You said the air. Is the air here dangerous?
No, not the air, but it is this place that is dangerous.
I think, gesturing broadly to the Aeonian, right? Is this the cenotaph?
No, the cenotaph is the vessel, the heretic paladin's flagship.
Oh, the paladin stole a whole fucking ship. Okay, that's not Argo. That's Mitch just putting two things together in my head.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of hit that clear here, what he's telling you is that this kind of chisel strip that we saw in the hangar appeared to be kind of a dispatch that was part of a reclamation mission from the Concordat to recover this kind of apostate paladin who had stolen or made off with the ship of the Amaryllis Legion and seemingly kind of wrecked it into the Aeonian. It's sort of clear from what we're taking out, last time there is some activity that appears to be of kind of Concordat design towards the back half of the ship. What he is telling you here is that there was a second Concordat effort to kind of recover and basically do what you're doing, right? They are your predecessors in trying to get on board this thing, but something has gone wrong.
I think last thing Argo would ask him before kind of letting go and letting him slump back into the balcony and letting the doctor do whatever he wants, right, is how many of your men are left? Who's still alive?
I thought I died so many times. I thought I was dead before you came here. I've seen visions between waking and slumber, between past and present. What is death in a place like this? There were 20 of us. Some may be further up. We left 3 to guard the entrance.
Dead.
You must heed my warning. There are other things here that take the shape of us. And I think as he sort of spits out us, I think he even kind of splatters some of this you'd see in the spittle, this kind of cesium color.
Gross.
I think, Argo stands up. Put him down, doctor.
It's just something for the pain. I'm not actually putting him down.
Sure.
Whatever. I think, like, as maybe you tighten your grip around the syringe, I think, like, he's kind of trying to fight to stay awake and is just sort of repeating this: leave, turn back, go, while you still can, go. And before he sort of slumps back into unconsciousness, I think with that wavering finger kind of points down this hallway on the balcony, like to your left.
All right, time to go the opposite direction of that. And I think we should proceed.
So you've administered the sedatives. We're letting this guy drift off into the sweet sleep.
He needs some alone time now. He needs some privacy.
So I think, like, as this figure slumps back, you have this kind of open world segment. You can kind of choose what you're going to do here. And so as a reminder, you were kind of like standing, here on your HUD display. You have this long balcony here that stretches kind of on, and you can see to the left, being the kind of aft end, the back of the ship, there's this column that runs kind of through the center of this cylinder. Towards the rear, from the outside of the hull, you could see that there was this kind of bulbous knot, like a burl in a tree, growing on the exterior. You can kind of make this out on the interior as well, where this kind of accretion has cropped up. And from the viewing on Bracco's magnifier, what we saw last time was that on the far end of the ship, near this kind of burl in the stone, there is kind of a seven-spired basilica that seems to have kind of cropped up here. And it is kind of striped with the typical Concordat white ceramic and shot through with that gold cesium color. Sort of like the Hagia Sophia is the image in my head here of like a kind of domed basilica where this sort of burl thing is. You can see that there are more of these statues kind of at regular intervals. There are other doors, I think, here as well.
I think before we set out in a direction, right? I think that Argo would, kind of gesture to bring the squad together again. And I think as I begin to speak, I also am pulling out my communicator. I imagine it looks kind of like a clunky kind of Game Boy device, like a small display screen and like a simple kind of input pad. But I think there's an image on its little CRT screen that indicates a wavelength. I'm recording as I'm speaking. Right.
Oh, interesting.
And I think, Argo kind of square up his shoulders, take on a little bit more of a formal tone and presence here. I want to address the mission parameters before we continue any further into this ship. The Aeonian contains some kind of biologic or machine intelligence, and I think gesture at this dying Concordat soldier next to us. It bears a disregard or disappreciation for humanoid life. And then, wider hand gesture out across this vast expanse, right? There's that battle cruiser over here. I don't know if we've given it a class name yet. I like Conciliator class battle cruiser.
Sure, works for me.
The Cenotaph, apparently. And I continue, it's capable of withstanding or overcoming a militant Concordat incursion. This is now a possible first contact scenario with a potentially hostile alien intelligence. These stakes have increased considerably. I'd like to make the motion that we update our mission parameters to include cataloging and assessing the intent and capabilities of the entities aboard this ship. Are there any disagreements there?
No.
No. I think he would kind of wrap up here, right? We are in uncharted waters, operating outside of context. I have never seen anything quite like this in my entire life. I don't know about you, Dr. Forstall. You're more of the expert. Does this match any of your historical experiences?
Of course, there's always stories of plagues and... God, oh wait, what's the word I'm thinking of? There's actually a Latin word. Oh, a genius loci. Is that how you say it?
What does it mean?
So it's basically just a sort of a protective spirit of a place. I think that we're seeing something similar to that.
So you're saying this is some kind of defense system for the ship?
Yes, I believe so.
Great, I love a challenge. Pollux, our dying homie.
Not a homie, definitely enemy combatant.
Oh, right. Well, homie in a dismissive way, because he's dead or dying. But he said that they take the shape of some of us, right? like they are trying to trick us into thinking that they are more like us than they normally would present themselves. That's I didn't mishear that, right? He's like they kind of take on a different form.
Yeah, what's this guy on about? He's like saying some weird stuff. I'm with you. I think like you know, this man is clearly unwell and is kind of in a sort of fugue state. Just to clarify on that, I think, you know, he did say that these things change form, and that they can, you know, take the shape of like us or other things. This, I think, would corroborate with what you've experienced like thus far. These, you know, sentinel phage being a kind of dire reflection of a microorganism here rendered in large scale. You've seen these folding and merging patterned, like I'm calling them birds for lack of a better term, but you know, like those AI generated like kind of creatures that is sort of falling back in on itself as they flap their wings. And so, you know, I think what you can probably make out here is that the way that this kind of stuff is maybe appearing to you is possibly because it shows something that was familiar to you.
I am going to. We've said that like our badges, right? Like our Silent Accords badges have like some level of like communicator capability, right? They're supposed to be keeping us in sync with the home base, right?
Yes, and that's actually a good reminder for the listening audience as well. This whole mission is beholden to a 12-step clock that I'm calling Aeonian stability. And I think with the kind of dire warning from the soon-to-be departed Pollux here, I'm going to click that forward one. So you are at 2 out of 12 steps on this. And I think with that, like as you're surveying, I think you can feel your kind of skin prickle as that thrum starts building up again in the background, kind of emanating from the aft of the ship.
I am going to attempt to load up and send out the recording I just made of me like restating our updated mission parameters and a kind of like the description of our encounter thus far. Just in case things go really bad here and we want anyone else to maybe hopefully know some of what happened to us.
You can certainly try. And I think what Perneb had told you was that, you know, it was unlikely that two-way communication would be possible. And I think as you maybe like load this up and click it into the kind of like emblem on your badge, you would sort of see it like attempting to send message, right? Like, you know, it's just probably going to have the spinner going.
Yep, sure.
Unless you have some idea to like boost that or something. I would say you are kind of operating on a prayer here.
This is like procedural, right? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work now. Maybe later, if things get really bad, I will attempt to send out a more urgent message. But this is just like how you do this job, right?
Okay, give me a compliance dice roll, and we'll see if you successfully follow operation regulations. I'm just kidding. We don't have that. Maybe if we're playing some other crunchier game. So, yeah, I think that message goes somewhere. We'll see.
But back to the ship, right? I think Argo's starting to kind of scan the horizon, you know, keeping an eye on like the movement of these different entities out there that we can see. Also just kind of charting like what the nearest paths are to us. Looking at the other two again. I think that our best bet here for understanding what's happening on this ship, its capabilities, is finding the command center.
I would agree with you.
You lead the way, I'll clear the path.
Something we can agree on, finally.
How do we find that, I guess, is the question.
What do they say about space pirates? There's only two places you really go. That's either the engine room or the bridge.
Yeah.
So, good question. And what you can kind of make out is the sort of hub of activity seems to be at the aft end of the ship, in, on, and around this kind of burl.
Is that where we have to go, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, if we get closer to the burl and the activity, that we will be able to get a closer idea of where they are coming from to approach this. You know, was there something floating in the middle of this?
There's a
like
column, right?
Yeah,
column.
exactly. There's like a central column that the cenotaph has crashed into. And I think that, you know, on the aft end of this, like this burl is so large that it's sort of overtaken part of this, you know, column, probably reaching to the edge. And I think on the side of the interior column here, like probably closest to you, is sort of where this basilica is.
I'm gonna mark my spy gear here so that I'm pulling out my like you know, like my like extending spyglass telescope, right? I would like to just again kind of sweep my telescope kind of around the area of where the ship, the Cenotaph, has crashed, where the Burl is, but really focusing on like this pillar or this column that's like hanging in the center of the Aeonian, and I'm really trying to study it to see like, does that column look like it has an interiority? Does it look like we could get into it? You know what I mean? Like, is that possibly a potential site of control or like technological importance or functional importance to the ship?
That sounds like maybe a study roll. We'll call it a gather information. I'm going to just kind of put that at controlled standard.
If it's just gathering information, I think I will just go with my 1 in study and see where that takes me. All right.
That's a 2.
Limited information.
Yeah, I think, you kind of pull out this looking glass, and as you kind of sweep, I think, right to left down this column, there's the kind of like cabling and maybe hosing and tube, and these are quite vast. They're probably even kind of like inset. I think periodically on close inspection here, this column, there are probably like sort of a transparent pane, like a window maybe at points. I'm going to say like very, kind of big science fiction-y set piece. And I think suspended in this, you can kind of see this cesium in a fluid state. I think kind of at points free suspended, at other points kind of emanating from something. And at other areas, I think even kind of like wrapped like tendrils around this column. But, on a 2, I think you're able to make out a fair amount of detail here. And I think as you pass towards this kind of burl, one of, we talked about on the outside of the ship, the outside of the burl had like these holes that were too small for a ship, but seemed to kind of lead into something. On this side, I think you can see that burl is sort of crawling with these sentinel phage, and they're kind of going in and out of this burl, out of like kind of a similar hole here. So like presumably that's maybe a point of entry and exit. And, as you're kind of doing this, I think as you sweep, you on a 2 are suddenly startled as your looking glass here, as you're surveying the kind of burl. I think you can kind of make out, again, like, we talked about this bird shape as being like a metamaterial fluid falling back into a crystalline shape. And as I think you are looking with your spyglass, on a 2, I'll say something looks back. And I think one of these shapes, there's maybe a small group of them. I'd say they're vaguely humanoid in that same way that it's like familiar, but not almost like a silhouette, and are probably kind of free of detail. But I think, are sort of like a mirror image. I'll say there's 3 of them and are kind of looking at you. And I'm going to tick that clock again. You are kind of officially, you have been acknowledged and they are aware of you now.
So not a gather information roll. I'm getting consequences.
Turns out,
yeah.
I'm going to add one there. I think on a 2, this was going to happen kind of either way. So thematically, we'll just move it along. You're not being punished. This is what being a player is all about, big guy.
Do we want to get to the center onto this like inner column so that we have a better idea of what is happening all around us instead of being on one side of it and looking? Or, I mean, also I think of these the xenophages as like, especially with them going in and out of the burl, is there something to be traced and tracked to lead them to? Like, is it like ants going back to the hive, the queen bee kind of thing? And if it is something like that, is it better to follow that trail, or like you would with ants, throw a stick in its pathway and they all scatter and they are now discombobulated, and you have a bit more ability to work within their disconnection?
These are good questions.
I think I lower the spyglass, right? Like, I think we've been spotted. We need to move soon. So right now it's pretty quiet in this space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is like a kind of danger in my mind in trying to navigate through this ship when is like, there's nothing covering us moving, really, right? Besides the immensity of the size of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're like on this kind of fairly exposed balcony. There are these like statues around I would say on the right side. If you're looking down this balcony towards where the burl is, to your right is kind of the open expanse of the Aeonian. To your left, along this balcony, would be like other kind of doors and rooms, sort of in like what kind of looks like a city block.
Okay. I think probably it makes sense for us to try and head towards the center of activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have very little to go on. The design of this ship is alien. but it appears right now that most of the activity is centered around that burl, the Concordat ship, and their connection to the column. I think approaching that is the fastest way for us to at least gain immediate access to something going on here, right?
Yeah, we might be out in the open, but luckily I came prepared for that. If something gets too close and we don't want it there, it won't be there long.
Braco, why don't you chart us a path, quickest way to get across this gap towards that thing? I'm gonna make some noise to give us a little bit of distraction.
Okay.
And I would like to, at this moment, flash back to something.
Ooh, very exciting. Okay.
And let me know how much stress it costs to flash back to this, but I would like to flash back to when Argo was preparing to send the drone up into the ventilation shafts. And I think what the camera cuts back to show us here, and I'm going to mark this on my inventory right now, I'm marking a detonator, which the game defines as an extremely deadly explosive weapon that fits in the palm of your hand and can be thrown. Takes care of those shielded doors heavy blasters can't handle. Illegal. You shouldn't have this. No, really. And I think what we're flashing back to is Argo reaching into his coat and removing this, like... I imagine it looks kind of like a bouncing, like a jack... You know, like we were playing jacks? Right? It is kind of like spindly orb that has like these little like protrusions, right? These little sensors coming off of it. And I think like Argo is like depressing some of those and like extending others, and that's how you set this explosive.
Okay.
But I'm putting the detonator inside the drone, right? That's the flashback I'm having right now. And I think in this moment, Argo is pulling out his little like communicator like brick again, and is trying to pull up the signal on the delinquent, the drone that got carried away inside the air shafts. And I think I am going to send a message to the delinquent to detonate that detonator inside of it. And just kind of like blow something up wherever in the ship they brought that thing to, and maybe create a little chaos to like cover our movement.
Okay. I like that. The way that flashbacks work is that you can pay stress to invoke a flashback. Flashbacks are resolved like any other action. So like 0 stress would be an ordinary action for which you had an easy opportunity. 1 stress would be a complex action or unlikely opportunity. And 2 stress would be an elaborate action that involves special opportunities or contingencies. I'm kind of thinking this is 2 because it's sort of a contingency plan. You are also kind of trying to use a device to like activate a kind of subroutine in the drone, which you know is already fighting through some interference. I could bump that stress down to 1 if you have like a idea to, I don't know, use like some equipment, or I can give you devil's bargain here. Or yeah.
So what? How much stress is it for the flashback?
Oh, I'm gonna say that is. Oh right, sorry. I'm mixing these up. I'm thinking about the outcome like right now.
Yeah, like just flashback to doing that. Is that 1 or 2 stress?
The flashback alone, I think I'll call 1 stress.
All right, cool. That lets me know what's gonna cost a push here. So yeah, I think I'm probably hacking to try and activate this drone. I feel like that's probably the move that makes hack computer systems, reprogram robots or drones, jam surveillance and communications. I'm kind of like trying to unjam surveillance and communications, right? Which is kind of
that
like
works for me. Yeah, hack sounds right. So you have 1 in hack.
Yes. What is like the position and effect to start here?
A lot of unknowns here. So I'm gonna call this risky great. I guess part of this is like you're saying it's a pretty sizable detonation, right? Like this is kind of a special ordinance for this kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's like the description says takes care of shielded doors. Okay. So I'm imagining that this is like enough to like, you know, this is more than a hand grenade, right?
Yep.
This is like a small brick of C4 in terms of like explosive power, right? I think like could destroy a vehicle, could, you know, punch a hole in the side of an armor or something if we were in a mech game, right? I think this is like a big enough explosion that it's going to cause internal damage to the systems around it. And mostly I'm thinking here that I just want to like draw their attention to hopefully not near us.
Sure.
And I'll mark hacking tools here. Maybe this is like withdrawing like a signal amplifier, right, from like within one of my pockets that slots into the side of this little handheld communicator I have that I'm trying to send the message to the drone with.
Yep. So that works. And so you can take another dice for that item. right? That's how that works. If you're using equipment from your load, you're getting one dice
Opposite.
from it.
No. Equipment gives you increased effect or position, and then
Oh,
it's
gotcha.
pushing and like gambits and stuff that give you dice.
Yeah. So I think using that, we can kind of maybe upgrade that to controlled great. You've kind of got the prep there. You're using the special item. We're gonna push through it. So yeah, give me a 1d6 in a hack roll.
I'm gonna spend another gambit here if that's cool with everyone.
Do it.
Just give me 2d6 here because I would like to like set us up for success as we try and then navigate our way towards like the next step here, or the next objective. Rolling 2d6. All right.
Ooh.
That is
So
a
that
1 and a 3.
1 and a 3. So a 1 and a 3. A 3 is bad outcome.
Controlled.
It is controlled with the use of your prior prep here and the flashback. I think, it does go off. Like that's, the dice outcome here is not whether or not the action takes place. I think it's in part kind of like what happens from it. I will say, I don't know what your detonator exactly looks like if it's part of the communication thing, but I think, we kind of build up to this moment where you're like, okay, like gonna do it, and it chunk and like nothing happens, and so it, maybe takes a couple clicks of the button, but you do hear this kind of implosion happen, and I think you tell me actually. Do you have an idea for what this thing explodes like?
Oh, what is it like, right?
Like, is it concussive? Is it energy? Is it implosion, explosion, loud or quiet?
I like that this is right, like energy. It's like a fundamental bomb in some sense, right? Maybe we see like close up on the interior of the drone, like it's like blue, like electric arcs going between all of the different like rods
cool.
as it, starts
Like
to pulsate before like
arcing.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. And, just as a reminder, like last time we saw this, the drone went up into the ductwork, kind of fell. We saw it being carried off by some skittering legs. We snap cut to the kind of Jax transformer thing here, kind of arcing with energy. If we're looking at like a pinprick camera inside of this, I would say the wiring inside the delinquent, I think is also kind of almost like a slime mold creeping across it has sort of developed. We see maybe a split second of this cut before it explodes. You can see the cesium meta fluid stuff is kind of inside the delinquent right before it explodes. I think from where you're standing, in kind of an instant, there is this burst of energy from the burl kind of near the basilica. Chunks, I think, of this burl kind of break and fly out. I think it's sort of like kind of smells like ozone briefly, and you can even kind of see, I think, some of the stuff adrift in this area, right, as a small explosion kind of erupts here and sends chunks of this flying. And, I think it's far enough away that you don't feel the shockwave, but you can kind of see the shockwave happen. And from this eruption, I'd say it takes a second, and then suddenly there is just sort of like a gush of these sentinel phage that kind of come pouring out, like when you disturb a spider nest. Sorry to Tim, trigger warning. And they're just sort of crawling out here. I would say the burl also starts to drip and bead this like cesium fluid. And I'm going to click the clock one more time. So that brings us up to a 4 out of 12.
Yeah, that's not exactly the outcome I was hoping for, but
but it does give you kind of a momentary cover. Like you were sort of spotted earlier. This explosion has happened. There's a bit of chaos over there, maybe giving you kind of an opportunity.
Yeah, I guess with that, while that was happening, and Argo was asking Brago to find a kind of a pathway through. Would that be scramble? Or
yeah, like
because Skulk seems more like Silent Snake, whatever.
Sure,
that
depends on how you're trying to move through here.
Solid Snake.
Solid Snake. I have never played this
Silent
game.
Snake is his brother. Please.
Oh, is that true?
No.
There are many snakes. Yeah.
There are many snakes, but not Silent Snake.
Not
Solid
yet.
Snake. Silver
Kojima,
Snake.
if you're
boy.
listening, I am ready. I will be cast as Silent Snake. But yeah, it kind of depends on you, Bracco. Like, you can run full tilt here. That would probably be like a scramble. If you want to kind of like sneak along here, you're right. That's probably like Skulk.
A scramble, like
you guys are moved quick.
Is this a group action?
Yes, it is. If you're moved together.
Are we approaching it? Are we trying to get up close to get a better view on it? Are we trying to get out of its way? I still feel like I don't know what our approach is.
I think Argo is suggesting that like that is the center of activity, and if we are searching for like a central hub for this like system or for this ship, or to find greater evidence of like what's happening here, that is our best bet. If
Right.
either you or Forstall like disagree, I'm open to like have
No.
that conversation about it. But I think that is like Argo's opinion, is that like
I do best face to face with things, so
this is
yeah.
like a time limited situation, right? We know the Aeonian is going to jump out again, or worse for us, fly into a sun. Either of these bad for us extremely, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think like Argo's like pitch here is like we don't have time to skulk around and case out the entire ship and find like the systems that we want to like study. We need to move quickly, take notes as we go, assess and deal with the problem. And like the most direct way to do that is shooting straight across towards where the burl is, where the cenotaph is, and those are both touching the pillar, right? That runs through the center.
Right.
That pillar
Let's get
also
to the
feels
pillar.
to me. You have this huge thing floating in the very center. Usually that's where you put something important.
Yeah. Agree.
So yeah, this sounds like a group action to me. And maybe Bracco is leading. You were kind of the vanguard here. So the group action works like when you coordinate multiple members of a team to tackle a problem. You describe how your character is going to lead that in a coordinated effort, and then every player character involved makes an action roll. The team counts the single best result as an overall effort. However, the character leading the group takes 1 stress for each character that rolled a 1 to 3 as their best result. So as discussed, this sounds like a scramble. And I think the action here is that you guys are kind of like booking it to kind of make your way further down this balcony, kind of coming towards the basilica before the chaos sort of settles from the explosion. Right?
Yeah. The basilica's across the ship from us, though, right? We have to go down and through the...
Yeah, think about it like a tube, right? And so we have the 2 faces at either end of this tube. The back face of this is where the burl has cropped up, where this kind of column starts that runs through the middle of the ship, and the basilica is sort of at the base of it. And so keeping in mind that we're in like, a science fictive kind of space O'Neill cylinder, I would say we're probably not going to get extremely technical about architecture because I'm not that kind of GM, I guess, but you could probably take this balcony, as far as you can tell, just about all the way to that face. Like it probably runs the entire length of this column, like a central boulevard. You know that there were some of these other funiculars going up and down the sides of the face, and there are also cars that are like a transverse down this center column. But from where you're standing, like you are not, I guess, like at one of those stations, but it's possible they're over here. Presumably, there would be periodic ones. But you could also like maybe go all the way down this kind of boulevard to that face and find your way down by like rappelling, or maybe you've got a grab chute or something else along the way that'll jump out at you. And I would say let's roll this action roll unless anybody's got anything else here.
What's our position and effect?
Yeah, given that this did not go super well, I'm going to, I mean, I guess it went well, it still exploded. I'm going to kind of take that from risky to desperate, and I'm going to say it's desperate standard.
All right, I get an extra 1d if it's a desperate roll, so I will be rolling 2d6.
All right, lock and load.
I have 2 in scramble, so.
I got 1, so.
You have 1? I think you have 2.
Scramble? Oh, yes, because we're not skulking.
Yeah. All right, ready?
Yep.
All right, let's go.
Bada bing.
Oof.
Okay, so you succeed. We got 1 6 out of that. And
You're
the
welcome.
outcome was like a 6, a 4, and a 3. So you are taking stress out of every 1 to 3, so that's 1 stress for you, Bracco. And yeah, I think, kind of like moving in maybe a formation, you guys are worried about getting seen or being prepared. And so I think on a 6, you are able to start running here. And as you're kind of moving down this, I think the light in here is sort of dim at points, but, there's this kind of gash to the open cosmos that you can probably see here. And I think as you're running, you can even see the distant stars kind of shining in through here. So it's almost like a kind of ethereal-ish lights as you move through. But there are these kind of like running lights along the column side of the installation you're on. And as you're running, I think you are kind of like passing by other entrances. I think some are like long hallways like the one that you entered from, and others are rooms. And I think they have kind of, like big transparent windows kind of leading into some of these. On a 6, as you're kind of moving through here, that's a success. So I'm not going to like trip you up or anything. But I think there are signs of the reclamation units of this Concordat group before. Like there's signs of them, having passed through here too. I think a couple of occasional bodies. And I think as you are kind of making your way, right? And I think it comes to a point where there is a kind of like funicular, right? And I think up to the other side, like it's almost like a cable car. You probably can get to that central piece, but on a glance, hard to tell. Because what has finally brought you to a stop near this sort of station terminal is there's what looks like at some point a barricade was set up here. Not quite like a full military grade, barricade, but it kind of bears the markings of the Concordat. There's some of these like candles that I think have been extinguished for some time. There's a couple of bodies here too, which have that same distended jaw. And there are some weapons, I think, piled up, like almost like something, they were trying to hold something back. This sort of terminal is also on one side to your left, set up at the entrance to what looks to be an open, large room that I think on first glance, Dr. Forstall, you'd probably immediately notice, it seems to be set up as kind of a laboratory. And there is, I think on a big slab in this room, it's the same kind of cool stone, but there is like something in here. I think it's dim, but you can like see through the doorway that there is like shapes of things in this laboratory setup.
Okay.
And at this point, I think you can see that far wall. You can also see this funicular. There's no car there right now, but there's like the station terminal.
Well, yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't think there's time to do any experiments, but I'm gonna go.
Wow.
I'm gonna go to the terminal.
We gotta go in that lab and see what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. maybe the more intelligent among us can go in. Well, do we need to fucking blast down this barricade?
So I would say it when I said barricade, it's sort of like a bunch of stacked crates or cargo containers, other kind of detritus here, stuff that's probably kind of like hauled out of this lab. So you can probably see like computer towers, like kind of maybe stacked on one side. It's probably about up to your chest, sort of like what you would think of as like, shooting from cover behind. And that seems to be where these Concordat like soldiers were right before whatever happened here.
And we're at a terminal that has a cable connecting to the center pillar, right?
Yep,
but no actual car here.
Correct.
Okay.
So
just kind of setting the scene again. Yeah, there's this kind of lab room entranceway to your left. There's this kind of barricade in front of you, and to your right is this cable car terminal.
I think that we should check out the terminal.
You don't want to investigate the Concordat lab, Dr. Forstall?
No, I need to look at the lab. I'm so sorry. I have to check it out. I need to at least poke my head in there and look around a little bit.
If the Concordat found anything that can help us understand the inner workings of the ship or point us in the right direction, we're better off than blindly stumbling through the Aeonian.
Into the lab.
Okay, so to your left, you kind of enter this lab, and I would say it's a similar door frame from what you exited the antechamber to, and it's dark in there right now. Currently, lights are off. There is kind of like a big slab raised from the floor, and like along the ceiling, I think like racks and runners, and there's like stuff hanging from the ceiling in here. Yeah, but it's pretty dim at the moment.
Is there a switch?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to flashlight across this bad boy, right?
Oh, yeah, I guess that too.
Yeah, you can do that. I think you have a flashlight in your equipment, right? Or something along those lines.
I got spy gear, I assume. Yeah.
So clicking on your kind of pen light, taking a sweep in this room, I think just on an initial pass, this slab that's raised from the floor, there are the remains of something here. This is a long room, probably 40, 50 feet long, and on this slab is something that is bisected down the middle. It is kind of squid-like, I would say, and these long tentacles hang limp from hooks hanging from the ceiling that like run the length of this room. This thing is like open, almost like it was mid, dissection, and it is, I think, like kind of gray, but clearly kind of iridescent at some point. It has kind of like a glimmer of, metallic sheen. And yeah, these tentacles are kind of draping from these hooks down the length of this room.
Gruesome.
Disgusting. We leave.
And this is not a sentinel phage. This is something else.
This is something else. I think that the kind of like lab has kind of various levels of disarray. Like I think, there's like big vats and jars like along one wall here, kind of like set into the ceiling like a Bacta tank that are broken.
Sorry, so to be clear here, this is not like a Concordat field lab. This room was a laboratory already.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Like we're looking at structures that are a part of this ship, not just like things the Concordat set up while they were exploring here. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Right.
Concerning.
Since it is not a lab that the Concordat set up, we don't know what necessarily lurks in the shadows. Bracco's gonna start going in with flashlight on, tip of the gun, like clearing the rest of the room.
Sweeping? Yeah, sure.
If it's that big of a room, there could be other things in here, and the only way we're gonna be able to deal with that is if we see them, and then they can make their move and I'll make mine. Sorry, Doctor, we might be past the point of collecting specimens right now.
Maybe I'm not going to try and collect a specimen, but maybe try and identify whatever this organism is.
Sure. Why don't... Bracco's kind of sweeping through the room here. Dr. Forstall is going to examine this kind of remains in this room. There's kind of two separate actions here. So, Bracco, why don't you give me... are you kind of sneaking through, or are you kind of just trying to identify, and pinpoint danger? That's probably either like a scramble or a skulk, and then we'll get to you, Doc. As you guys, I think, are picking your way through the entrance and doing this kind of initial sweep, even from the transparent windows that look into this sort of operating theater, those flocks of sort of bird-like things are kind of, I think in a moment, right? When you walk in and maybe when you click the flashlight on through this transparent window, you see a rush of this flock kind of blow by the edge of the balcony. Presumably they are maybe looking for something that set this explosion off at this point.
Sorry.
Yeah, do you know what? Maybe we'll call it skulk, and it's just kind of...
So you're kind of sneaking around.
Clearing the room, trying not to make too much noise. The sharp turns pointing.
Yeah, give me a skulk roll.
What's the position and effect on that?
This one is going to be, I think, a desperate standard.
All right. Rolling.
That's
Three.
a 3.
Oof.
Okay, and then I'm coming for you, Doctor. So I think as you're making your way through this room, you're kind of ducking underneath some of these lower hanging tentacles as you're kind of moving through these broken vats and stuff. And I think the light on the barrel of your gun passes by another one of these sort of interfaces like you'd seen in the antechamber. This one, however, is kind of hovering maybe, off of a smaller pedestal. It's the same kind of sphere in stone, probably about chest height. It looks like it's sort of near this, these vats. There's kind of a station set up here, possibly kind of an interface control. And I think as you pass your light across there from the far end of the room, I think you hear something rustle and maybe some cans and bottles or something kind of clatter and fall.
It's a cat in the dumpster. I guess I have my gun out.
Yeah, Bracco also gun immediately there,
and I think
light on it.
Totally. And you snap over there, but there's seemingly nothing, right? And I think as you kind of look in one direction, maybe you hear something, gives the impression of it being, behind you or somewhere you didn't look yet.
I'm just going to try and get this physiker roll out of the way.
Sure.
I'm going to try and study this corpse and gather
I get the cat
information
thing now.
it.
You're talking about in Alien?
No, in all the horror movies.
Oh, yeah.
It's a cat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's classic trope. Yeah. Okay, so you can do this physiker roll now. So this is a study roll. Again, kind of studying a malady or corpse. You can gather info.
5.
That is a 5. Okay, so gathering information, you can ask questions here.
Do I recognize this or the species of this organism?
That's a good question. I would say that it is not particularly unusual. It's definitely alien. It is big. I think it is probably something you've seen in a textbook somewhere, maybe not firsthand experience, but This is a sort of creature of the void. So this is a kind
Oh.
of space organism.
So this is not what we would probably call an intelligent organism.
Probably not. I think it's like a kind of thing that is like part of the biome of open vacuum.
Okay.
So I think like on a close look here, you know,
How did it die?
Yeah, sure.
From being cut open.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
probably dead before it was bisected
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
And I think on a close look, it's sort of like one of those deep sea fish where when you bring them up out of their natural pressure environment, you can kind of see that it's
Like
sort
the
of
blobfish.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of broken down a little bit towards the edges. I think it's been here for some time, just like these bodies you've seen before. Like it's sort of dry. Its interior has like bones, weirdly. Like I think it sort of has a rib cage where it's been opened up. And I think from where it's been opened up, where like a mantle bone would be, is a sort of dried, almost like when crystal evaporates. Like there's like a crystalline structure here of that same cesium.
Okay, it's infecting everything. Good to know. It's that's all I need to know. Okay, now focus more on the scary
And
noises.
yeah, so I think you kind of got that quick glance at probably these are like two things happening at the same time, right? Like you're like, oh my god, there's this metamaterial in here. And that's what I think, you hear this clatter at the far end of the room. Argo, what's going on with you?
Ooh, I think Argo is like still kind of near the entrance of the room, has not drawn a gun. Pen light out, is just kind of on high alert, right? Like a cat poised to jump.
It was you rustling the cans.
Yeah, right. No, but it's like the hair standing up on the back of his neck. Like I think there's like an internal sense of wrongness here that he's trying to interrogate. Kind of like, what's the thing that's setting my like spidey sense off right now?
So I'll give you a couple options here. Like you could certainly roll to try and discern what's going on here, maybe like studying the room. But if you wait long enough, something will probably happen.
Why not? Why not? Let's roll some dice. I'm looking wherever the other guys aren't, basically, right?
Yep.
Like, if Bracco's kind of like skulking across one part of the room and Dr. Forstall's in the center examining this thing, I think I think pen light off. I've put it down and I'm kind of like letting my eyes adjust to the darkness, trying to kind of like
Cool.
not moving, almost like not breathing, right? Just kind of in this like stillness as I am waiting for anything to happen. And so I think that is probably a study.
Let her rip.
Position and effect.
This is going to remain, I think, a desperate standard. You
Desperate?
still have these things coursing outside, like looking for you.
Desperate is great. That gives me an extra dice. So I will roll 2d6. Do I want to push myself here? No, I'll probably wait until I fail this roll and then push myself for whatever the consequences are. So yeah, rolling 2d6 to just kind of like become utterly still and kind of like tensed, like ready to respond. Looking for... Hey,
Okay, that's a 5.
partial success, baby.
So that's a partial. I think, like, from your vantage here by the entrance of this room, after you click your light off, I think you can see the kind of beams of light from Bracco and Dr. Forstall kind of scanning through this room. But it is with the benefit of having your eyes adjust, where I think you get the first glimpse of a kind of, like, shape moving here on the edge of the room, but maybe more than one. What you see is a kind of spine of a quadruped on 4 legs, and I think the spine kind of has almost like spiny extensions along the back. It's pretty dark here, but you can like see it moving, almost coursing around these kind of crates and material in the room up towards where Bracco is like looking at this terminal, kind of flanking. I think from what you can tell on a 5, I'll give you this too, is like it is sort of shifting almost like a cat. You can see its like shoulder blade kind of slide silently. It probably is this like back is what you can see kind of peeking up, and it is like probably 3 or 4 feet high.
I think...
Should we just shoot it?
I think I'm going to like let out a low whistle to alert Bracco, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and this is maybe like falling back on like ring tactical combat training, right? I'm not good at whistling, but like a kind of like a quick bird whistle that's like eyes up, attention.
I don't think you need to roll for it.
I'm trying to not roll here. I'm trying to get Bracco to deal with this
Yeah,
thing.
do you know what? I think with this whistle, Bracco has done enough work as like, mercenary. I think there is like a certain amount of like tracking that comes with his experience. Like He has to find people. He knows, like, he is more aware of this space than maybe even whatever this creature is thinks he is. He thinks that, like, maybe the creature thinks his back is turned, and Brocco knows that you wait for the moment that it's close, kind of like the whites of its eyes. And if it's getting close, he's waiting until it's about to strike and just turns and, levels gun, pulls before it would jump.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. Just to intersect a little bit, love this sequencing. So Argo gives this kind of tactical whistle. At that moment, I think is like when you start to turn, and as you turn around, I think you are prepared for this. Maybe we're even acting on a hunch.
Mm-hmm.
I think you start to turn around, and it's like as Argo is whistling, you turn, and this thing is like right up on you, and it is like rearing to pounce.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Argo's whistle and your turn happen in a pretty quick succession. So you like whip around, and I think as it reacts, it is startled by you. And, as you're raising the pistol, even in this kind of dim light here, you can see that it is missing a face. Like, it does not have a face per se. It's dark here, but you can see that it kind of ends in, I think, just kind of like a flat geometric face, not unlike the Aeonian itself.
Mm-hmm.
And as you draw, I think it kind of like hisses sort of, and this flat kind of featureless face sort of opens up.
And right in the fucking mouth.
And I think like it looks like it's kind of rearing up to attack, but I think like as it sort of opens up, you can see that as it pulls these layers apart, the interior of this thing is that same color, right? Like that cesium kind of crystalline metal materials.
Yeah. I mean,
give me a scramble, I suppose, unless you've got another idea here for like loosing a round off.
Yeah, is it, I guess, scramble or scrap? Because is it getting into it?
Yeah, scrap. Scrap is good.
I have 2 in both. But so I'm trying to think. I guess like I want special ability scary. You have an air of medicine danger obvious to everyone. You gain potency when trying to intimidate someone if done immediately after a show of force. Like, this doesn't bother Brocco. It not having a face is only easier for me to kill it because then I don't have to see anything fucking react to it.
Are you shooting it?
Absolutely, just shooting it.
So yeah, I think we can say you gain some potency here. I'm gonna do that on the basis of like how quickly you reacted.
Right.
Like,
and I go.
It was trying to catch you off guard. You caught it
plus
off guard.
+1d going forward after the show of force. So that is just what I was trying to like.
Yeah, your next dice roll will have an advantage, and you'll gain potency on this. So this one I am going to say is
potency is like increased effect.
Right. With your move, I'll call it great. So if this kind of works here, you can get the jump on it. I'm going to put a 3-step clock for this creature.
Well, let's hope that my gun...
What are you shooting it with?
Gotta be the blaster, or not the blaster rifle, but just the regular rifle.
Yeah, we've talked about like sawed-off shotgun style. He's got lots of guns, but this is one that he can pull over his back maybe and just like wide spray of... maybe that is some type of like fundamentally based, kind of in the similar way that Argo had his detonator. It's like a fundamental spray that it upsets the space around it and whatever it's targeting. Like, so it's not just a blast, it is that, but it also fundamentally alters what it is coming in contact with.
Yeah, totally. Like that's cool to me. Like an anti-fundamental flechette.
Similar in its like, in the way that the null field emitter that we have. Like,
sure.
Rolling 2d6.
Okay.
4. God.
That is a 4. So that's a partial. So it succeeds. The great effect gives it 2 clicks on the clock. So now it'll be at 2 at 4. And I think that as you whip around, it's a flash of like energy kind of from the muzzle, right? And you're really close. There's really no missing here, but it's a partial success. And I'm going to say like this thing is kind of like rearing up and jumping at you as you pull the trigger. These rounds like tear through the front of it. And I think I'm imagining this as being like kind of like a sweep through, right? So it's like it does penetrate here, but it doesn't stop it exactly. Like tears holes through it, but it is like on top of you. And I think its forelimbs end in jagged claws and tears at you. And so I'm going to give you the level 1 harm here. You can resist, you can push yourself, you can pull something off here, but...
Question. In this flash of this gun going off, Do I see any other ones approaching?
I think in this moment, you are pretty focused on this thing bearing down on you. So if we kind of back that up, right? You kind of release this muzzle flash from your kind of anti-fundamental flechette rounds here. I think this is happening as this metamorph creature is like mid-lunge at you, and so it's kind of jaws open to this cesium glare. It does land, but I think it like tears through it as it's kind of sailing towards you, and it is like going to attack you here for a level 2 harm. You can resist that. You can maybe pull off something here if you got something clever in mind.
I guess I can mark armor, but just in the fiction.
What is the harm?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it is like the level 2 harm serrated, and these forelimbs of this thing end in kind of jagged claws, I think that are like that same color. And I think they even kind of like in mid-lunge here grow, right? Like they're sort of purpose built for this, and it is going to kind of tear into your chest.
Okay, so if I mark armor 2 to resist that, I'll do that. But in the fiction, I think it's just because as an Aurelian, like, he is a tough-skinned... Can that work as, like, marking that as armor? Just that he is, like... It's not going to cut through him like it would.
Sure. So we'll take that down to a level 1 harm here. And if it was going to be serrated before, we'll call this lashed. And I think you probably are wearing, like, some amount of armor. I think we talked
It's
earlier
got his
about,
cool
like,
leather jacket.
You had your leather jacket. And I think, like, it kind of tears, like, a jagged rip from the shoulder, probably down to kind of near where your sternum is. It does hurt. I think it does break the skin.
Sure.
But I think you kind of are bleeding, though.
Okay.
And, where... it kind of falls, I think, to the ground after kind of tearing into you here, or you throw it off. And, at that point, I think you can see that where this flechette round has kind of like sliced through it, I think you can start to see it kind of like sucking and pulling, like almost like it's separating.
Okay.
Let's pivot off of you for a second.
Yeah.
Dr. Forstall, Argo, you just saw this happen. What's going on with you two?
The good doctor is hiding.
Okay.
I feel like maybe she's literally like tucked herself away in a cabinet.
You're like peeking out of something.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
I've seen Dr. Forstall kind of like hide herself away. Maybe I'm going to take a stab at this thing, and maybe go quite a literal way. I think, if we like cut the camera back, right, like after that whistle, I think maybe it's Argo moving like quietly, like low to the ground, like kind of using the big dissection table in the center as like a little bit of cover to try and quietly position himself to come from behind this thing that was attacking Bracco. And I believe I'm going to mark a melee weapon right now.
Okay.
Argo is withdrawing like from within the folds of this like big overcoat, just like a pretty straightforward, like long, double-edged, like combat knife. But I do think that like as I draw it, there's like a depression in the handle, right? I click it and there's like a little like electric burst. Like this thing is also like an like electrified knife.
Okay, cool. I like that. So
and I think what I'm trying to do is like slip up behind it, while Bracco and his big loud gun have its attention. I think Argo is trying to kind of skulk, you might say, through the lab unseen to come behind this thing, and I imagine like attempt to drive this knife like in the base of that kind of like elongated net.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. You've got 2 in sway. You can of course push yourself or any other ideas, but if not, go ahead and roll 2.
What's the position and effect?
Oh yes, excuse me. We'll call it desperate. Great here. It's at a 2 of 4. I think if you can slide this thing in and get it to land like right at the sweet spot, you might be able to end it here.
Am I attacking from hiding or springing a trap?
I don't think you're springing a trap.
From hiding?
I would also kind of question here. I mean, like this thing is kind of it's like on the ground. You've maybe got the jump on it. Yeah, sure. I'll say it's you can kind of count this as hiding. It's still dark in here.
All right, so I'll take an extra dice from that, because when I attack from hiding or spring a trap, I take 1d from shoot first. So with that and Daredevil, that'll put me at 4d6.
Jesus. All right.
Said desperate great.
Yep.
4d6. Let's rip.
That's great. I have 1 in everything, baby.
Yeah, but you ramped it up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me that skulk roll to kind of get in there and drive this knife in. Oh, quite a spread. 4 dice. That's a 1, a 3, a 3, and a 5. So
Partial success,
that
baby.
is a partial success. You, I think, are able to kind of like run up behind this while it is kind of recovering. You know, these flechettes like tore through it lengthwise. And, you know, as I think you're kind of bearing down on it, it is almost like it kind of glows from within, this kind of goldish color. But you are able to get that knife right at the base of the neck here with that electric spark. I'm imagining, you know, when it makes contact, it like completes the circuit, right?
Mhm.
And I think that like a crackle of this electrical discharge kind of runs through it. And as you, I think, push the knife in, it sort of gives like a non-Newtonian fluid, right? Like almost like a liquid with a bit of resistance. And once you spark that knife, I think you even see the surface kind of like crackle and sizzle like a cat with its hair standing up. And on a 5, I'm going to give it 1 click on the clock because you successfully collided. But this like charge spurs off this separation. And this thing, one of these strips of it that's like pulling apart here, starts moving kind of like a flatworm across the floor, leaving a trail of this kind of cesium. And it is working its way up the side of this slab.
I mean, stop that.
Yeah, I will take another fucking.
Actually, I'm gonna take a shot.
Ooh, from hiding.
From hiding. I'm
From the
gonna
cabinet.
I'm gonna come out of the cabinet and sort of brace my forearms on the top of the counter
Cool.
and take a shot.
Okay, nice. What are you doing to take a shot?
That is a scrap. I have 0 in scrap. Can I use a gambit, boys? What do you think?
Last gambit. Make it
Is this the last gambit, really?
unless we get a 6 on a risky roll.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll take a gambit, so I'll bring it up to 1d6.
Okay, that's 1d6. You're shooting it with your standard issue kind of sidearm pistol here.
Well, that's the one that Brocco gave me at the beginning.
Oh, yes, right. We'll say it's a desperate standard. If you fail this roll, there will be a consequence. I can give you a devil's bargain now. You can push yourself or any number of other...
I'm going to push myself for an extra die.
Can I assist here?
How are you assisting?
I think it's the other hand with the pen light I had earlier, clicking it on to follow that thing's trail to highlight it as it's moving towards the table.
I'll take that. Yeah, you can assist.
I'll take another stress.
Yep.
3d6.
Take a stress, and that'll give you 3d6. You're pushing 2, so yep, go ahead.
3.
3.
Oh, that would have been so cool to get a success on that one.
I think you are taking shots at it, and you know, from your kind of like braced position, and you are actually colliding with it. Like you are hitting it. Your accuracy is pretty good. You know, Brocco gave you a pistol pretty dialed in, and I think that the rounds, when they are coming right at it, you can see it like almost avoid the shot, almost like an amoeba. Like it like separates and kind of grows around it. And you know, this thing is sort of like moving up, crawling towards this cadaver on the table. And I think from your vantage, Dr. Forstall, it makes its way into the kind of chest cavity of this like squid. And I think almost like kind of similar to where we saw that boulder before, like this puddle of the kind of cesium fluid here, you can kind of see it react. And one of the tentacles that's on the hooks hung in this room, I think like you can hear it groan and creak as it's trying to kind of free itself from this like kind of cabling. And all in a sudden, like lurches and kind of bats one of these tentacles at, I guess, which one of you is closest? Argo?
Probably, yeah. I
were right
crept
there.
around the thing and then...
And so I think this thing, you know, kind of throws like one of these gnarly half-rotten tentacle things, and you feel the bulk of this slam kind of against you, and you are kind of thrown across the room into one of these kind of glass, like vial, not a vial, but like a glass like tank that kind of runs floor to ceiling. And I'm going to say that's a level 2 harm here as you collide into this. Yeah, what do you do?
What's the harm?
I mean, I'm going to say like battered and bruised, unless you resist here, because you're kind of like getting thrown into this glass tank that I think will like shatter when you hit it.
I will try and resist that. Probably like a prowess resist, right? Like I think this is like Argo sensing the motion in the air and like instinctively like dropping as low to the ground as he can, trying to like drop out of the way of whatever's coming to swing at him, right? Like it's just like an instinctive hit the ground. There is dangerous stuff moving around you. So I'm gonna try and resist that.
Okay.
Which prowess, that is going to be 4d6 resistance. Is that downgrading or is that getting rid of the harm completely?
You know, you have such a range of abilities under prowess that I'm going to say that if you succeed in resisting this, because you said you're going to like duck essentially and act kind of quickly to get out of the way, it will kind of avoid the harm.
Cool. Then yeah, I'm taking 6 stress minus the highest dice result. Prowess, it's 4d6.
6.
Ooh,
Nice.
6, baby. No stress. This simply does not bother Argo.
Unfazed.
Couldn't be less.
I mean, I think that's
care
cool,
less.
right? Like,
Yeah.
is you are cool and calculated. You are like ready for this. Your instincts tuned. Your, cybernetic augments have your synaptic response dialed in for this sort of thing.
I think Argo is like a kind of skinny man who looks like he's in his mid to late 50s. And I think that kind of moves fairly like cautiously through the world, right? Has this kind of like poised, like careful movement. And I think that there is like something about the way, like, it is a different kind of body movement, right? And we mentioned like his like cybernetic augments. I think some of this is like, what do they call it in like Shadowrun? It's like wired reflexes, right? It's like this body moving in a way that betrays its like exterior appearance, right?
And maybe it's even like quicker than you are really aware of, right? Like you hit the floor, you kind of dodge out of the way, and I think as you kind of maybe raise one arm up as the kind of shards of glass as this space squid tentacle shatters this vat, I think you can even smell old blood, right? Like as this, I think it's kind of lodged in this vat, and it's like tearing, trying to pull itself out. Rocco, I think you can see that like this open cavity here is like sort of bubbling or like broiling with this kind of cesium thing. You have kind of a moment to react here. You can feel just the presence of this thing is like giving off kind of a similar weird fundamental energy as the interface in the antechamber.
This might shock you, but I think I'm going to try to shoot it again.
Okay.
Also, I realized I didn't do this last time. With my special ability, Wrecking Crew, your strength and ferocity are infamous. When striking in melee, you gain 1 more dice. And
okay.
I realized I didn't do that last time, but...
Well, you're using a gun, right? You're not striking in melee.
Oh, is that... never mind.
You can.
Well,
I mean, you haven't done anything yet.
That's true.
This is a different action, so you can respond.
Ooh.
You're going to need to act quickly here in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, okay. Brock is not afraid to get a little close too and hitting with like a vibroblade just to kind of like slice it in half, like kind of going for what would be a throat cut just to like end it.
Where's the throat?
I don't know if it's like a squid body, right, where the tentacles are.
Yeah.
Trying to separate the upper part from
okay, smart. Yeah.
where would be the legs, so that that cavity would drain if it was cut in half, and or at least separate whatever maybe would be a brain to what would be the tentacles.
I was just teasing you, but that's a good answer.
All right.
So give me a scrap roll. You are taking the benefit of your Wrecking Crew. You gain strength and ferocity. When striking in melee, you gain 1d forward.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that because this kind of tentacle is ensnared at the moment, this is going to be risky standard.
All right. Rolling 3d6 for this. Please, God in heaven, let the strong boy do his thing. 5.
All right.
That is sick. So I think, like you'd said, overhand, pulling this kind of blade out from your armament here.
Mm-hmm.
The key piece for me is like this vibroblade, is like acting at like a sonic vibration that can like cut to the edge of like an atom, right? And so in a pretty quick slice here, I think you have successfully severed the body, and it's long, right? Like, this is like maybe 10 feet of the head of a squid, probably another 30 of the tentacles. And as you kind of collide with this, you can effectively cut off the area where this like cesium metamaterial is welling up. And you can even see, I think, that those tentacles kind of drop limp here. Yeah, and you succeed. So I think in a moment this dips down. There is still this kind of like reservoir of this stuff. And I think, like we talked about just a moment ago, it has this kind of like non-Newtonian surface, right? So it's like you can kind of see it ripple. I would say when you slice that, it kind of fires and sizzles for a second, and it calms down here, maybe as it's kind of coursing and sensing for any other neurons that can tap into. I wouldn't say that the threat is completely dealt with. I think even the surface kind of threatens to like erupt, and unless anybody else has anything here, I think I can kind of tie this up into our next moment. So I'm going to say, like, you sever this, and maybe that's the moment you spot button you can press and chunk like a kind of in like an alien, sci-fi movies have this where it's like the operating table has like a glass cover that slides out. And so, this thing kind of like chunks over the open table. And from this kind of pool of the meta fluid here, you see it kind of lash out, right? Like at this glass cover, and it cracks. And you're probably a little startled, I think, by how abrupt this is. And again, kind of like rising from this pool, a shape starts to form, and you see, I think, shoulders emerge, but different from the skeletal form you saw before. Certainly not as impressive. I think it's like pint size comparatively, kind of rising from this well of this like open space cadaver. And what I think emerges from here unfolds, right, with long kind of quite triumphant, almost like angel wings, but they look odd, and they're kind of extending from Podrin, right? And I think this only sort of forms to the chest and kind of continues to kind of dribble into this and falling back into itself. And these kind of wings and this, armor set in front of you, I think you would kind of recognize this as a Concordat Paladin's armor. And I think it is kind of like from the Podrins, there are kind of like I think arrows maybe sticking out from one side. The other is inset with, like the insignia of the amaryllis flowers of the tombstone. And like a voice kind of emanates from this, right? Which is like,
we had been searching. You're close now.
Another jerk. Great.